Hello and welcome to the Sci-Fi Expo podcast number 1. My name is Joshua S. Johnson. Today, I want to do a little bit of a departure from what I regularly do. And unlike every other podcast that I've been putting out that just says podcast, everything that has Sci-Fi Expo is going to be practically what the name implies. A profile of different science fiction personalities, in this case independent science fiction projects and personalities that you will find across social media. Today I am very pleased and very happy to be talking with someone who is an absolute professional in what she does. She is someone who has dealt with many talented people, award-winning actors and actresses, and she is the person who has provided the architecture for one of my favorite independent science fiction fantasy shows, The Minister of Chance. Now, for my younger audience, I want to let you know that my guest on the podcast today is a role model for young women who are looking to get into and get understanding of the behind-the-scenes aspects of the entertainment industry. Listeners, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce you to...
Yes, this is Clare Eden. I'm the executive producer on the Sonic movie, The Minister of Chance.
Claire, could you tell me how The Minister of Chance got started?
Well, initially, Dan wrote a series called Death Comes to Time, and in that series created a character called the Minister of Chance, who at that stage was being played by Stephen Fry. And they discussed on many occasions how it would be a really exciting project to give the minister a universe and a life of his own in his own series. And eventually they got to the stage of thinking, well, let's go ahead and do that. But a variety of things coincided at that time, not least of which that Stephen just seemed to be winning every award going in this country and had the most monumental schedule, including a lot of filming abroad. So we agreed that we would carry on without Stephen, because he had no idea what his availability was going to be like, and we would go ahead and make the series as an audio series ourselves. And at that point, we decided that rather than even waiting to sort out the commissioning processes in this country with places like the BBC, that technology was such that we could make the series ourselves. There was no reason why we couldn't make the series, release it online, and use social media to promote it. Part of that confidently done because my husband is actually in that world of social media, so I was aware that such things might be possible, and so was Dan. So we decided we'd have a go. At that point, it was financed by Dan's overdraft, and now it's financed by crowdfunding. It's the actual fans that pay and support the series and buy each of the next episodes.
Well, the cast and crew of The Minister of Chance is immensely talented from all angles of the production team. I was wondering, what was your background when you approached The Minister of Chance? Was it similar to Dan Freeman's in terms of a creative background, or...?
Well, my background is completely separate. Dan has a history of making audio drama. My background is in agenting. I was an actor's agent for many years and was friends with the woman that looked after Dan's voiceovers. She introduced us to each other, and at that stage I stopped working as an actor's agent following the birth of my first child, and by then I had 2 children, and I was thinking, what might be interesting for me to do next that was involved in the business. And she introduced me to Dan, and we decided we'd go ahead with this because although Dan is, complete genius at all the creative side, and he's the one that writes the scripts and puts all the sound effects on, he needed someone to help him do the kind of organisational bit, the casting, the contracts, the putting it together. And that was the role that I took on. But my background's been definitely in agenting either actors or directors, lighting designers, producers. So a very broad experience, but not one in the audio world, other than doing contracts for my clients to take part in something.
When you went into The Minister of Chance, were you already a fan of science fiction or fantasy? Did you like Doctor Who?
This country, primarily the the science fiction project that most people use as their starting point would be Doctor Who, and that's a series that I've watched and loved since I was a child, but I wouldn't describe myself as a Whovian. I love very well made science fiction. I love very well made anything, and that's my background from being an agent. Dan is the sci-fi geek who could talk till the cows come home about sci-fi projects that he knows very, very many things about. Mine is very much just watching something that I think is a very well told story, and it may be science fiction, it might be something like Blade Runner, and it might be something of a completely different genre, but it will just be something that has an excellent script and a story that I enjoy being told. And that's how I've come on board the Ministry of Chances. I think it's a really compelling tale with some really beautifully drawn characters, and it was very easy for Dan to persuade me to come on board and help him make sure that we told that story well.
What would you describe the Minister of Chance as?
I would describe the Minister of Chance series as a sci-fi fantasy series, and again, another series that's been very popular here has been the Merlin series, and that's shown at a time, prime time Saturday evening, family time, where you can sit with your kids and watch it, or watching something like even a Harry Potter, but something where your belief is suspended and you just follow an extraordinary tale of magic and wonderfulness. I mean, the Minister is science fiction, but it's very much fantasy as well. And you've witches and warlocks and spaceships. It's a very bizarre combination. And for me, it's just a story where I find myself endlessly wanting to know what's going to happen in the next scene. So I don't care what genre it is. I just think it's a really excellently told story.
The cast that you've assembled for the Minister of Chance is absolutely amazing. Julian Wadham, Jed Brophy, Lauren Crace, Paul McGann, Sylvester McCoy, Peter Guinness, Jenny Agutter.
Yes, Jenny Agutter. So, because she's well known across many genres. I mean, the one of the first things that brought her to anyone's attention was the children's film The Railway Children, when she was a teenage actress. And then she'll have done something like, say, Walkabout. But she's very well known for things like American Werewolf in London. It's a real pleasure working with somebody like that. And I think she embodies as an actor what I'm saying about my role as the producer on this, is that she responds to a script, whatever the genre may be. At the moment she's in a series which is, phenomenally well received. They're called the Midwife series, which is actually on television as we speak here, and which has been showing in America as well. And it's a series set in the 1950s about nuns and midwives. And basically, she just picks up a script and thinks, this is a good story, I'd like to do it. And I admire that in all of them. And yeah, we've got some real sci-fi stalwarts. Obviously we've got 2 Doctor Who's and a member of Blake 7. But when we've cast it, we've always started with the voice and the actor and whether they're right for the role. There's nothing in this is what as an agent you might call stunt casting. We've always thought not just are they right as a performer, but physically are they right? I mean, that's unusual in radio. Often actors say, oh, it's great to do radio because you get the chance to play something you wouldn't normally have been considered for. But Dan and I have only ever cast somebody that we can visually see playing that role. If we, turned up tomorrow and decided to make it into a film, they could all just move across. So when they're working at the mic together, you will see characters like the Minister and Kitty engaging with each other and actually being exactly what you would want if you were watching it as a television series or a film. And I think it helps them, I think it helps us. And because Dan's soundscape is very visual, it's quite extraordinary. We say sonic movie for want of a better description, and people don't really know what we mean until they hear it. And because he creates the audio soundscape in such a way that actually the film pops into your head, it's very, very visually led. We found that all of that has ended up being much more visual than oral. I don't know, have you been listening to or reading our cast and crew profiles?
I sure have. I catch your guys' posts regularly on Twitter at Minister Chance, and I'm really surprised by the people that you have on the project, both as a creative cast, but also behind the scenes.
Today we did Ian Nolan, the photographer, and it's bizarre to say that one of the key members of the Minister of Chance team is a photographer, and yet it is, because there is such a visual element to the project that we're making. And because we have such an unusual way of reaching the audience as well. I mean, this is very, very much a team, and that team is not just the cast and crew, but it's the fans that support it. We call them Minister Moguls, but these people are the ones who, buy a perk, like a signed poster or a T-shirt or a beanie hat, and they, in doing so, are giving funds that will help us to then make the next episode. If it wasn't for them, it just would not be happening.
One of the things that has drawn my interest sharply in the Minister of Chance is the technique, the very unique techniques that Dan Freeman uses to mix the performer's audio together and create these scenes, these soundscapes that create landscapes in the mind. It's a fantastic work and an amazing technique. The motion that he puts in there, his ability to present the scene in such a way that is appealing to people who, like myself, are more into visuals, more into like TV series, more into films, the Star Wars generation. That's where I come from.
You're not the first person to say that. It is bizarre, and if you haven't listened to the series, we sound mad having this conversation, but if you have listened to this series, then you understand. And we were at the BBC Radio Audio Awards recently. We'd been nominated for Best Online Drama, and we were listening to some of the clips from the dramas that were being played there, and trying to work out what might be different in what we do. And if you listen to radio in this country, very commonly there's a narration. There's either an actual narrator, or there is narration included in the character's dialogue, and they will set the scene for where you are, whereas Dan absolutely does not do that. Is the audience have to work at it. I mean, you really do need to listen to know what's going on, but he, instead of giving you any dialogue clues that you're in a huge corridor in a palace, he will create the soundscape so that in your head you're thinking that the way that the echo of the sound comes back at you, and the sound of the clipped heels on the concrete floor walking down the hallway, is you will come to your own conclusion in your own head of what the visual is, and you find that people are jumping straight to the visual in their heads the minute they start listening. If they're listening to the start of episode 3, for example, where it's just it's a good minute or so of squelching mud, but you absolutely know it's squelching mud. You hear it and you think, okay, they're in a marshland, and you fill in the whole landscape in your head before the character starts speaking. You know exactly where they are in terms of the story. And similarly, he will do a leitmotif. There'll be a music piece that enters for somebody like the minister coming on. You know exactly who's walked into the room. We don't need those commonplace things of oh, hi, minister, lovely to see you, and you think, oh yes, the minister must have just walked into the room. Is that he cuts all of that out. He makes the audience create the visuals, and because he does that, he leaves enough of a clue in the tapestry of what he's making that you actually get there very easily on your own. And unless you listen to it, it's very hard to know why I would be saying any of what I'm saying. But I find it extraordinary. I'm like you. I'm much more screen-led than audio-led. My natural instinct would be to watch film or television series, but this I find fascinating to be on. Absolutely fascinating the way he creates the sound.
I come from a heavy Whovian background, but when I watch Sylvester McCoy and Doctor Who, I always saw somebody who was jovial, a little bit whimsical, mystical, cryptic, and was able to pull it off in a very awesome combination. When I heard him in The Minister of Chance, he was evil. He was...
Yeah, he really is evil. And he loves playing that character. He really does love that character.
Now, I know I keep going back to Dan Freeman, the creator of the Minister of Chance, but I had a question about, does Dan do all of his special effects and the editing himself? Or?
Yeah, Dan does all the effects. He has different people on different episodes have helped with, say, some of the mixing. But in terms of the actual effects, that's Dan. Yeah.
So what's going on right now with the Minister?
Right. Well, episode 4 we are finishing off. We've got it. It's edited. Its sound effects are on there. It's mostly mixed, but there's a few tweaks that we'll need to do, which we'll be doing over the course of this week. So hopefully, not too long now before we'll be able to release it to our Minister moguls. They get it first. That's one of the perks of being a mogul, is that you've invested in making the episode and you get the episode before anyone else does. So they'll get it first, and then it'll go on general release. We've recorded episode 5 in terms of having the actors in the studio and actually getting the dialogue down. It still needs sound effects putting onto it, and it still needs a lot of the technical work doing on it. And we still have a fundraising campaign going on for episode 5 that's open on our website, because although we've actually had the actors in studio and that side of it's all been covered already, we've still got to raise the money to actually get the episode completed. And then we'll be able to get that one out too. And that will end the first season. It will wrap that one up rather nicely. And where it goes from there, I do not know. We're, all the way along this project, we've never known what might happen next. And we've constantly been amazed at good things that have happened. And we think, we just need to get 4 and 5 out and see where we go from there. I mean, it sounds to me like it should be made into a film and someone should be commissioning it next week, but who knows whether we'll be able to get that interest going.
The quality of the Minister of Chance is phenomenal. And I noticed that you guys' tech crew is fairly small as opposed to the size of the cast. Now, are there any limitations? I know that every episode that I've heard, you guys deliver an amazing show each time. But during production, are there any limitations associated with being a lower budget production?
Even with what we've made so far, it's all been done on a shoestring budget. Episode 3, which was the episode that was nominated for the BBC Audio Awards, we had 3 days of 3 days of recording. One of those days was in a studio, and the other 2 were in my living room at my house. And I live on a road opposite a railway station, and behind us, they've been knocking down a huge warehouse and building a whole office and home complex. And we literally, from both sides of the living room, had either trains arriving or the sound of buildings being knocked down. And yet, the way that they did the sound, you would never in a million years guess that. And that's just clever audio work. We've got 2 great sound guys. We've got one called Chris Mock, who does most of the work at RADA. Does all the work at RADA, but most of our recording. And then we had a guy called Jim Armstrong came and worked on location for us on that 3rd episode. And they know what they're doing, and Dan's just very confident. He the actors turned up and thought, oh my gosh, there's a train station opposite, is that going to be a problem? And I think maybe once or twice we had to redo a line because there was some noise that we did think was too much. But other than that, we went through the whole day, 2 full days of recording. And his view is that if you're listening to something and you hear a noise, then you think, oh, what could that noise be? Actually, conversations in complete silence, which is often what you get, or have conversations in silence with a bit of music playing behind it. There often are noises. There's often, people talking next door, or there's someone walking past the door, or, a noise goes on outside. That's what life sounds like, and his is such a realistic sound that the audience don't become aware of anything going on other than thinking, they're in a really busy courtroom place, or they're in the forest and that's a bit of a wind blowing a bit of tree or something. He's an absolute genius at creating that soundscape. He's actually designed the sound with his optimum way of you listening being on headphones, I mean, he's made it so that you can download it onto your, your iPod or your iPhone or, your Kindle, any of those gadgets that you have on you wherever you go these days, and, certainly if you're commuting. And he's made it so that you would listen to it on your headphones. Now, you can listen to it on your computer without headphones, but if you do listen to it with headphones, you can literally hear someone talking from the left to the right, and you can hear someone move across the room. And he captures all that in the recording as well. I mean, even things like, you mentioned earlier, Paul McGann playing Durian and picking up the Isabel Collingwood, who was playing Princess Dee. And, he said, right, pick her up then. And they were both a little surprised. But he did, and you can hear it in the performance. When he's talking about, finding it behind her ear, and she's saying, oh, you mustn't touch, you know that he's picked her up. You can sense it from the way his performance is, even only just in sound.
Oh, Paul McGann. I am I am a Durianite, and I don't know if I'm the first Durianite, and I hope I'm at least in the first 3 or the first 5 of your fans who became so. Durian is smooth as a character, as is a predatory, civil presence to him, and in that very first exposure to the character, his ability to completely turn the situation around with such subtlety that it might escape some people immediately, but once you catch on to what just happened in that scene with Durian and Princess Dee in the prologue, it'll blow your mind, because it's something that I didn't expect it when I heard it. And also the way that Paul McGann is able to shift from what we had heard, my preconceived ideas of what that character would be, changing, and then establishing his presence and what the character represents.
It's a delicious performance. That prologue performance from Paul McGann is absolutely delicious. And yet, ironically, there you are listening to this. It's kind of honey dripping, mellifluous voice, which is just bringing doom to this poor country.
Oh yeah.
And then you cut, and he's being as nice as you can imagine to the girl that was playing Princess Dee, who hadn't done anything before. We just needed a child who could play a kind of 9-year-old. It was her debut, and she sort of walked into the studio, and he was fantastic with her. And then, cut to horrible, dripping evilness coming out of him. Just brilliant.
Any surprises coming up in the next few episodes?
Obviously, I've got the benefit of actually knowing what happens in episodes 4 and 5. I've not only read them many, many times in the script process, but watched them be recorded. And if I can imagine myself as a punter, I would really hope that the fans will be pleased with the way with where he's taken the story. I think he's written 2 more very, very good scripts, and there's some lovely new actors coming in. We've got Jeb Brophy coming into episode 5, who is in The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings series, and Philip Glenister, who over here is probably best known for things like Life on Mars and Mad Dogs. I think both of which have played in the States too, but he's a phenomenal actor. And each time, we just think he writes a delicious character, and it's terrific fun for me to be thinking, oh yeah, what about this person? See if we can reel them in.
Well, I'm afraid we're out of time, Claire. I want to thank you for talking today.
Brilliant. Well, lovely to talk to you, Josh.
That was Clare Eden, the executive producer of the science fiction fantasy audio series, The Minister of Chance. Check them out online at www.ministerofchance.com and also on Twitter at ministerchance. Thank you very much for listening to my podcast, Sci-Fi Expo #1, interview with Clare Eden. To find out more about different independent science fiction and fantasy projects around social media, follow me on Twitter at Sci-Fi Expo. This has been Joshua S. Johnson. Have a good day.